So welcome to the 1% podcast. My name is Luke Doran. I'm the host and founder of the 1%. As I said previous weeks, the idea behind this podcast is for me to get clients, ex-clients, client alumni who are busy men, very successful from a career perspective, absolutely thriving in that aspect, but in some regards, when I first speak to them, potentially struggling in some areas because they're not showing up as they want, they're stressed, overwhelmed, maybe health is not in a good spot. And so bringing guys on to have an open, honest, frank conversation about where they're at and the journey they've been on with me. Now, of course, the gents that I speak to have gone on a journey, they've been working with me and a coach, but equally, I think there's power in these conversations for anyone listening because you get insights as to where someone was and what they can do. And ultimately, for all the guys that listen to this, and if you're not in a good spot, you recognise there is something we can do and there is action we can take. And conversations like I'm going to have today with the legend that is Mr. Steve Farrell, I think will be incredibly empowering. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve Farrell. Steve was a client with me. We're just saying offline, he first started 4 years ago, so it's been a long time since Steve started this process and he's been out in the wild on his own. So I think it's going to be a very powerful conversation. Before we jump off, Steve, do you want to just introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do?
Thank you very much, Luke. And look, massive thanks for having me on. I don't think I'm quite the original club of the 1% club, but definitely an alumni and great to be on. And thanks again for the opportunity to do so. So Steve Farrell, I am a partner in a professional services firm, work primarily in the city. I'm definitely not from the city, as the accent suggests.
Definitely not.
Definitely not, but loving it.
Okay, cool. Well, as we said, we first engaged and spoke, like we said, rewinding almost to the day kind of 4 years ago. And I've asked you to come back on and have a chat. We've had chats like this historically because I think it's powerful because we did a load of work, again, way back when. And now you're, by all accounts, and I want you to speak, not me, in a good spot, physically, mentally, emotionally, thriving. And I think it's really powerful to be able to see that you can make changes that last and stick and are tangible. There's always work there, but that's it. So I think probably a good place to jump off would be, let's rewind 4 years into the past. I think maybe you'd seen a little bit of my stuff on LinkedIn, social media, perhaps maybe a peer or colleague had done a post. I can't remember exactly. We connected, you reached out, said it'd be good to have a chat. What was going on with you back then that made you decide to reach out and, kind of put a line in the sand?
For a start, as we were saying, I can't believe it's 4 years. Time goes so quick, tempest fugit, as I said. But thinking back at that time, I think context is really important here. Still relatively post-COVID. Lockdown definitely, on reflection, wasn't a good space for me. The sort of pressure that we all went through and lived and breathed in different various guises. But, both people worked from home, kids homeschooling, the sort of pressure of that coming together, bad eating habits, definitely a bad relationship with alcohol at the time and what that led to. Lots of family history of bad and ill health and worry, stress, out of shape, definitely not in the right space mentally, really struggling for confidence, actually, believe it or not. And a lot of people would have said to me at the time, he's no problem talking in public or doing big speeches and all of this, or day-to-day interactivity with work, but actually internally it was a struggle. And I wasn't liking it. I didn't like who I was at that point in time. But as I sort of said, you've got to be the first person to do something about it. And I think it was, I don't normally go down the route of PTs. I find it quite difficult in that sense to sort of be vulnerable and open up in that regard. I've had various professional coaches over the last time, but actually to resonate with someone on a very basic but very clear level, I think was part of the attraction to change.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing there, it's a pretty common narrative for lots of gents, right? And it's this: COVID has a massive bearing on it. It kind of poured petrol onto what probably were underlying bad habits anyway, but it can massively amplify them. And then come off the back of that, reeling a little bit. And then this dichotomy of, well, I'm doing pretty well professionally and work's going well. And like you said, outwardly looking in, Steve's confident, he's got it going on, but I don't feel like that. And I think the reason where that comes from is your own self-care, how you're taking care of yourself physically, mentally, what you put in your mouth, but also just like your general headspace and mindset is misaligned with that. So you present a certain way, but it's not how you're feeling internally. And you're knowing that the constituent parts of what you're doing aren't serving you internally. And so you almost have to overexert to hit that baseline, and that becomes pretty exhausting, right? And I guess the confidence and self-esteem piece with like, I'm not really doing what I'm saying. I don't like who I am, and I present that I do. I think that takes energy, and it's not a great headspace to be in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, that was manifested itself in various different ways. At the time, getting angry about everything and anything at that point in time, and looking back and sort of blaming the circumstance for what was happening, as opposed to dealing with the moment and actually trying to realize that you can't flip a light switch and everything's going to be magically okay. And, trying to come to that right realization at that point in time, it definitely is hard, but it also kind of sets you free a bit when you sort of stand back and go, okay, you need to set that baseline. You need to understand what you need to do, but there's definitely a pathway forward. And I think that was one of the most sort of refreshing points of early working together back in January 2021, was actually to realize that, this is going to be okay. It's going to take time. It's going to take a monster of effort, but it's going to be okay. And I think through those skills and through those techniques learned through the process, it was certainly very helpful for that.
Yeah, and it's that identification, like you said, of your exact words, like, and we touched on this offline. It's like, well, you're currently the problem, but you're also the solution, and that is incredibly empowering. It's liberating. Going, okay, to be crass, everything is a bit fucked at the moment. I'm not great. I'm not in a good headspace. All right, lying in the sand. Well, then, who's responsible? Me. Okay. Well, I might not know what I need to do, and I might feel a bit overwhelmed. I've got so much going on because of work, life, family, the rest of it. Okay, but it is within my gift to do this. And actually, there's a process I can follow. And that's empowering. It can be scary sometimes. And I think that's often where some of that dichotomy lies. Like, everyone kind of inherently knows that deep down, but you're just so squashed by bad habits, busy work, stress, whatever else. And you don't necessarily know what you need to do in order to kind of actualize that, right?
Yeah, sometimes, for me, I remember at the time very, very clearly, because I still have it in various sites. But sometimes when someone just tells you that, there's a simple reality of that hits home, and it's hard to hear. To your point, hearing actually all of these problems that you have aren't anyone's fault, really, apart from yourself, is difficult. It's just inherently difficult, for where you are and what you think you are and where you think you should be and all of this good stuff. It can be really hard to hear. But actually, when you start to work through it and you start to break it down, it comes with a great sense of, power is the wrong word, but you suddenly feel empowered to change it. Yeah, because then you start realizing that you're not reliant on these other 50 things that need to happen before you can start. You can actually start like right now. I remember the conversation around Steve 2.0 about right now. Right on this, I'm not I wouldn't claim to be in any way massively great shape, right? I'm not taking TikToks of myself in any form of gym at this point in time. But I remember distinctly this point around, we were talking about exercise, just to bring this to life for a minute. And I didn't do exercise. I think when I started this, I was doing 400 steps a day. That's how bad it was, right? I was getting out of bed, walking to the computer, work for 14 hours and go to sleep. But I remember we talked about exercise, and you had said about doing push-ups, right? And literally, the only thing I was doing was push-ups at the time more than anything else. I couldn't do it. And I remember you said, okay, but literally what can you do? Like, what can you do? Okay, and I remember attempting a push-up. I couldn't go anywhere with it. But I could go on my elbows and push up 4 or 5 inches at that point in time. I was like, good, that's what you can do. Now do it. Repeat it. Every day, just bit by bit. Bit by bit by bit. And actually, over time, you realize, and there's great power when you're actually able to do it. That's like one push-up. Yeah. Right? It's not the grand scale of things, but I have to admit, the feeling that you get when you're able to see that change is huge.
And that's ultimately, like we said, it's more empowering. So you could say, I can't do push-ups, therefore I can't do anything. It's like, no, what can you do? Right. Let's moderate that, adapt it. Now, push-ups, although it's one thing, it's quite a nice allegory for the rest of your life, because if you're, Well, I'm just an angry bastard all the time. Okay, are you really? Why? Well, actually, because what you're doing throughout your day. So like you say, you tell yourself that's it, shuts down the conversation. Or you go, well, why am I? Well, it's because I'm overwhelmed, answering emails at midnight, whatever else. Well, it's because that person emailed me. Have you ever told them that you can't be emailed like that?
You're
so,
correct.
Like, usually things like that. So, okay, well, this is what I'm telling myself. That's it. Is that what is it? And just ask yourself, well, maybe you could do something slightly differently. And so it kind of unlocks a way of going, well, there is another way we can operate, right? And that whole what can I do versus what I can't do. Most of us sitting can't. And I think a word that's banded around a lot in, I guess, corporate culture, and it's true, is overwhelm and burnout, right? Well, what is that? Ultimately, I think that's high level of anxiety in a situation where you feel like you have no control or autonomy. Yeah. Everything just constantly coming at you. Well, what we're talking about here, and push-ups is a good way to start. It's not the only thing by any stretch, but it's going, woof, well, I'm in control of that now. I can't do that. Well, I can do that. And I did that. Well, I can do something. Right, where next? And it's taking a bit of that and then applying it kind of holistically across the board, right?
Yeah, I remember at the time there was a metaphor that I remember you asked me how I was feeling. I told you I felt like an empty crisp packet blowing in the wind, right? And now, actually, anytime I see one on the street, it always brings me back to that moment and go, actually, no, I feel like I'm out in the wind now. In various guises, it goes ups and down. Obviously, you go through ins and outs, but that's basically it. And I also believe that's also around boundaries. You know, I had no boundaries on anything, because I kept trying, what I felt in myself was trying to be a hero for everyone, apart from myself.
Yeah.
And actually that was causing more issues to everyone around me and myself than had I just said, no, I'm going to draw a circle around that, and I'm not doing that anymore.
I think, well, that's why you unwittingly and unknowingly, because if it's not pointed out, you can't see it, you become the author of your own chaos. Right. It's like, well, I'm going to send emails at midnight, right? Because he emailed me. Who replied? You. Did you tell him you can't? No. Okay. Well, then maybe right. And so, but and it sounds really trite and obvious, but so many people operate like that and go, well, actually, what's my part in this? Because I can't control what someone else does, but I can control what I do, and I can say, well, one way to set a boundary is not reply to the email. And then all of a sudden, that person will realize you can't. I'm just using that as one example, but that, it plays out everywhere, right?
But it is a really good example, because I've also started to learn through the process the sort of situational awareness of how do you want people to feel, And the email example is a good one. The emails of the weekends, or my personal hit is the emails after the Antiques Roadshow on a Sunday night, because that's the end of the weekend, right? It puts everyone in a bad mood. And you put yourself in that situation, go, I can either feed this frenzy, or I can just put my phone down, go to bed, and get a good night's sleep and hit the Monday morning, because it's going to be there in the morning.
Yeah.
Right. And actually, the more you do it, it's really hard to do it once. Don't get me wrong. This is, for me, massive struggle. I have to constantly work on this. But actually just saying, nah, I'm going to put that on sleep, and I'm going to bed, get a good night's sleep. It's so empowering.
And I think we when we did that with yourself, Steve, and the gents that I work with, we do this. And it is, and look, I'm under no illusions as well. Like, it's difficult because you think, well, and also what's got us to the point we've got to, and I use we in the royal sense, right? All of us.
Yes.
The guys I work with, yourself included, driven, grind, get your head down, work your bollocks off, long hours. That's how we do it. Bang, bang, bang. And that's how you get to a certain point, right? And it achieves a lot. But there's a point, like we were discussing with you 4 years ago, and a lot of the gents that I speak to, where that's putting you into the floor, and it's actually not delivering the results that you want, and actually being so tightly wound and so on top is causing everything to be not as well performing, and actually impacts your headspace and so on. And so I totally get the thought of, oh my God, what if I don't answer it? And well, yeah, it's scary. Well, try it once. What's the worst that can happen? That's what he said to you. Okay, well, look, how's about you don't reply, or you put that boundary in? Are you going to get sacked tomorrow? No. Will the client ditch you? No. Okay, well, let's try it and see. You do it, and 9 times out of 10, no problem.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, and then, but again, it's showing you that confidence. Oh, I have got control here. Maybe I can do that. It doesn't have to be on all the time, and I think it's incrementally showing yourself through evidence that you can take change and have authorship within your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's fast forward to today, Steve. Like I said, it's been a while since we first started. I think it gives us a good sense of where you were at and what was going on. And I think from what you're describing, again, sadly, it's a common narrative of lots of gents, right? The whole, all great on paper, but, you know, the but being not where you want to be physically, mentally, kind of knowing that you want to do something about it, knowing that you're not in a good space, but not being able to see the wood for the trees. Now, you've done a load of work on yourself, and as we discussed, continue to do the work, which is amazing. That's why I love to have this conversation. As we sit today then, Steve, we'll call it, or Steve version 2 as we called it, what have been your, I guess, key achievements and successes having come through the process, and what's really stuck? What's allowed you to be in this kind of version 2 headspace?
So I mean, there's a couple of clear things. Firstly, it's about being comfortable who you are in your own skin, and not being, I don't know, maybe apologetic's the wrong word for it, but not being afraid of it, and also not being ashamed of it. Right, to sort of stand yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, dust yourself down every morning, and be able to say, yeah, I'm happy with that. Is it like, that's a massive sort of personal achievement coming out of all of it. I think secondly is a point around maintaining the discipline to do the things that I have figured out are good for me physically, emotionally, and mentally. Right, that took a year working together for me to figure out those things, but actually maintaining the discipline to do those for 4 years and counting, and for the next 40 more, hopefully, is also really pleasing. Because sometimes you get up, it's hard, it's difficult. You lack the motivation to do those things. You don't force yourself to go out for a walk because it's rainy and it's cold. And and it might not, you're not walking a marathon, I'm not running marathons, but actually you force yourself to do it. And it's those things, and having that discipline, I think there's a massive, massive win, because you don't know at the time, but it's so much better for you. I think the third thing, if is to draw out, is actually the impact on everyone else, and particularly friends, particularly family, relatives, and everyone else. My relationship with all of the above has massively improved, and that's the sort of thing that one of the real worries that I had, which is why I reached out at the start, is actually, if you go and you're on this path and it's not going to end well, and then you're left with this legacy of everyone looking at your children, not going to go, yeah, I don't know, I didn't know that person. I just knew them as someone who was really stressed and very busy and never had actual time. So the third and the really important part for me is this bit on presence, feeling a lot more present. That doesn't mean that you don't have to work hard, right? I work hard. I like working hard, and that's okay. But it does mean that the ability to make that time and to be present, to go on those holidays, to do those things, to draw those boundaries, that's equally important. So I'd say those three things.
I think the third thing you said there is for me, is really important, because this work isn't about going and living in a fucking cave and doing nothing and just, abandoning all worldly pursuits, right? We want to achieve, we want to be great in our careers, we want to push those things. They're really important as well, and it's valid, and it's not suddenly do a load of work on yourself, be a hippie and go and live in a cave and, but that's not what we're talking about. But it's being able to do the work, push yourself professionally, but that isn't the thing that defines who you are. You're amazing at it and you like it, but equally, it's not compromising how you then show up elsewhere, because the strange thing is often it's like you're working so hard also to support and provide for those people you care about.
Right.
Well, actually, if you're doing that in a way where you put yourself into the floor, they're getting a shit diluted version of you as a byproduct. Whereas what I love from what you said there, Steve, is like, yes, I am driven. I want to push myself forward in my career. I'm passionate about what I do. Well, that's in synergy and in sync with showing up as being a great dad, as a supportive husband, being able to be present when I'm there. And something that was touched on in a previous podcast, someone said about, the whole work-life balance. He said he doesn't really believe in balance per se, because if you're pushing and you want to be driven, there is never going to be true balance. But the core part is being there and present and available in the moments that matter, when you're at work, when you're at home. I think that's it. Like, work-life balance, it's not like a thing I can give you or you can buy from me or a program will deliver. It's, I think, you being in the best state and as emergent property, being able to show up as your best relative to the situations you're in.
Yeah, but I also think when, I have two relatively young kids, although definitely one's a teenager now, but when they see you go through a bit of that change, and they see you like working out, trying to do your bit, you're trying to have a conversation with them where I'll also ask them to help keep me a bit in the straight and narrow, right? So, if we're at dinner and I go from the phone, my kids will tell me no phones at the table, right? Because this is our time. Because I'll have to go and do some more work, or I'll have to do something else, and help you maintain that balance. Actually, that's dead healthy. Having that buy-in from everyone else around the table in that sense is so important to keep it going.
Yeah, but then also, I think you would say to your kids, "Oh, you shouldn't be on your phone too much. We should be there present with each other." If you're there on your phone, doesn't matter what you say. You're doing the absolute opposite. So you've got a little accountability partner in that to help you, but equally it helps reinforce what matters. There's a post I wrote today, and it just speaks to what we said there, and something I think it touches on what we're talking about here, Steve. So I just wanted to say it. So it says that kids won't remember what you say; they'll remember how you lived. Lessons taught, values upheld, love given. Your health, habits, and mindset don't just affect you; they shape your child's beliefs about life. One day you won't be there, but your voice will. You don't get to choose if you leave an impact, only what kind. And I think we're talking about that there, right? That's exactly it, right?
I mean, you could have got it more in a nutshell, and that's fortuitous that you put that out today, because it's 100% true. And actually, if you think about one of the drivers of us starting to work and all of that, it's fear. It was fear, actually, for me. And I'm not afraid anymore to say it, that I would end up in a bad place, leaving a legacy where those around me, the people who love me, would look at me and say, don't know what happened that guy. Wasn't the person I used to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a driver of constantly reminding you, right? 4 years, but happen through the next 40 years, of why are you doing this? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And I think you ask those questions every day, it settles you a lot.
And let's be honest, like we were talking about offline as well. Life isn't all unicorns and rainbows. You've had your challenges. Goes on constantly. You're constantly stress tested. Life throws you shit sandwiches all the time, and sometimes you have to take big bites out of it. Sorry for the crass analogy, but it's true, right? But equally, you're in a position where you're not getting rolled over by it. What we're talking about here is being resilient to it. It's not about saying you do this work and life's a magic, but ultimately your ability with which to deal with the situations that are presented, both good and bad. Like, celebrate the good stuff, but also when life's shit and it's testing you, you're also able to roll with it and deal with it and not just fold or revert to negative patterns of behaviour that might make you feel better in the moment, but actually they're not going to serve you long term. And it's, again, it's being in that more conscious, empowered state, because it's all a choice, right? And so it's choosing how you choose to react in a situation. But if you're taking care of yourself, I passionately believe you're better able to choose the more virtuous path for yourself and then everyone else around you, right?
Yeah, and look, you're entirely right on this, and to reflect on it, after we stopped working together, it's probably at the lowest weight, maybe I was from like decades, right? Am I heavier now than I was then? Yeah, I know. Is that a massive problem for me that I'm going to throw it all out the window and it's all going to doom and gloom? Absolutely no, it isn't at all. Because I know that for a start. I think actually when you look at what I'm doing and the workouts that I'm doing and so on and so forth, and I look at my sort of health stats, I'm in a far better physical health space. Critically, mentally, I'm able to deal with that now. Has my workload increased since we stopped working? Absolutely. It has. Probably about threefold, to be honest.
Yeah.
Have I completely flummoxed and fallen it all, broken it all apart, gone to the pub, hit the bottles and all that, done all the rest, shedded people? No. Because I'm able to deal with it. And I think that, it's that sort of obstacle type point where you sort of look at this and go, I'm learning a technique here, which I still need to fine tune and continually build on to deal with the stuff that life throws at you, whilst also keeping myself happy and not being afraid of who I am.
Yeah. And the final point there is not being afraid of who you are, because if the constituent parts of, because you are what you do, right? You're the sum product of your daily actions, habits, behaviours and choices. It's not really what you say, it's those actions. Now, you see all of those every single fucking day. And if they're aligned with the kind of man, person that you want to be, well then what is it to be afraid of? Because you're doing what you can. Life's still going to throw stuff at you, but you're aligned. Now, none of us are perfect saints all the time. You never shower yourself in glory constantly. Again, it's
Yeah.
not realistic to expect you're constantly going to go around peaking all the time. But if most of those commitments, most of the time, are serving you, you're on top and doing what you say, you generally feel pretty good, you know?
Yeah,
And if you do have infractions and you go, oh, fucked up, well, if you're in that kind of headspace, you go, hands up, okay, what have I done wrong and how can I improve it, and use that as a catalyst to be better as well, you know? So even the mistakes and failures, I'm using inverted commas, become things you can use, right? So
that's correct.
Steve, sorry.
No, because you mean this point you are right. Failures is a really good one, because I remember when we went through the processes a couple of times, go off the rails, something that happened, and then it blew up. So if we talk about it, what happened, right? What are you going to do? So how are you going to use that? On what the issue is. Now, of course, have I quote unquote failed since we stopped working together? Absolutely, you do. What I'm able to do now, though, in those circumstances historically, I would have blamed everyone else. That fault, this over here, I only did that because of this. But you're able to stand around and go, no, me. Number one, me, or I'm going to have to own that. And then secondly, what are you doing differently as a result? Right, so what is it that you're going to change in order for that either not to happen again or reduce the risk of that happening again, or how are you going to turn that into a positive, into something else? And actually, you know, the sort of self-exploration of finding out about that has been super powerful. And you're right, you're so right on this point about the sum of the parts of who you want to be. You know, I like the fact that I get up every day at 5:30 in the morning. I'm only able to do that, though, if you go to bed at 10:30 at night. Exactly. And that means that you can't be in the office. You can't physically be in the office or in the pub or out loads of times to do it. You have to make the choice to do that. And it's through those decisions where you sort of start to build this sort of picture and pattern of the person that you want to be. Long may it continue.
Exactly. Well, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting. I love talking to you. You are definitely a 1% OG, no matter what you say. And so it's a pleasure. I always love your insights. You're very honest and candid about where you're at, and you share openly. And I'm sure anyone listening to this has got a lot out of it, because for me, there's just power in hearing someone else's experience and what they do. And yeah, I'm a coach. Yes, people can work with me and I can help them. But I think equally just listening to someone and recognizing they've been in a dark place, they've done the work and they can do it. And the real beauty is anyone can, and it is within your gift, one's gift, the royal you, to be able to change. And you're a prime example of that. Like, yes, we did a load of work together, but you've been out in the wild for 3 years running with this stuff. And it just shows you, if you do the work, quote unquote, in inverted commas, right, and you do look a bit deeper, you get to the root of some of the things that are causing these issues, well then, you know, you're able to be consistent and show up as you want. So it's a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time. If anyone's watching this and they're interested in seeing how I can help, doing a little bit of work like I chatted about with Steve, drop me a DM and a note in the comments. On that note, Steve, it's been a pleasure, and I will see you all next week. Thank you. Cheers.